Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to say may feel uncomfortably familiar. When a man tells his wife to hide her beauty, he isn't protecting her. He's protecting his own insecurity and disguising it as love. You know that feeling, the moment something inside you goes quiet because you sense a truth you've ignored for too long. That's what this story taps into, the kind of truth men aren't usually allowed to hear from a woman's lips. But you deserve the truth, spoken plainly, without sugarcoating. There are men who marry a beautiful woman and then try to dim her light, cover her face, bury her presence, and shrink her existence. Not because she changed, not because she did anything wrong, but because her beauty exposes something he doesn't want to see, his own fear of not being enough. He'll tell her, "I'm just protecting you." He'll say things like, "I don't want other men staring at you," but what he really means is, "I'm afraid another man will see what I'm terrified to lose." Instead of rising into the kind of man who stands beside a confident woman, he starts trying to control how she dresses, how she walks, how she presents herself. He wants a wife, but only if the world can't see what he has. Because the moment other eyes notice her, his insecurities start whispering lies in his ear. He begins policing her beauty, not because she's doing anything wrong, but because her existence triggers every insecurity he kept hidden. This is where the relationship quietly dies, when a woman starts to shrink herself to maintain her husband's comfort. She begins to feel guilty for being noticed, guilty for being attractive, guilty for being who she naturally is. And instead of feeling cherished, she feels like a possession, a trophy someone is terrified of losing. Men who operate from fear always disguise it as protection. But protection doesn't restrict, it reassures. It doesn't silence, it supports. It doesn't hide a woman's beauty, it celebrates it. A man who truly feels secure doesn't need to dim the woman beside him. He rises with her, and he knows her beauty isn't a threat, it's a privilege. So ask yourself, why would a husband ask his wife to hide the very thing that drew him to her in the first place? She didn't notice it at first. That's how control works. It enters quietly, like a shadow that slowly grows until it becomes the only thing you see. And he knew exactly how to make it feel harmless. He didn't tell her to cover her face outright. He started small, questions disguised as concern, comments disguised as care, doubt disguised as protection. "Are you sure you want to wear that? You know men stare at you when you look like this, right? Don't you want to be respected?" He made his insecurity her responsibility, and she accepted it because she loved him, because she assumed he was looking out for her, because when someone you trust tells you something is for your own good, you don't question them. You question yourself. That's how her world began shrinking, one outfit at a time, one decision at a time, one piece of confidence at a time. He wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to protect his fears. She was beautiful, radiant, naturally magnetic, and instead of rising to meet her self-worth, he tried to dim it, to make her smaller, easier to manage, less visible to the world. Because deep down he believed he wasn't enough for a woman like her. So he tried to turn her into someone he could keep. A man who controls a woman's appearance isn't controlling her clothing. He's controlling her identity, her freedom, her ability to feel confident without seeking his permission. And here's the painful truth most men never admit. He wasn't afraid of other men looking at her. He was afraid of her realizing she deserved better than him. So she adjusted. She compromised. She tried to keep the peace. She started wearing what he approved. She hid the features he felt intimidated by. She avoided attention because he couldn't handle the attention she naturally attracted. And every time she made herself smaller for him, he loved her a little less, because he no longer had to fear losing her. Women lose their glow when they have to dim it to survive. Men lose their relationship when they confuse love with ownership. And she began to realize something. If a man needs to hide a woman just to keep her, he doesn't have a wife. He has a hostage. There's something you need to understand about a man who forces his wife to hide her beauty. It never starts loudly. It starts quietly. It starts with subtle comments that sound like concern but feel like control. It starts with questions like, "Why are you wearing that?" or "Who are you trying to impress?" said with a smile that doesn't match the tone. And before she even realizes it, she begins shrinking herself to protect his insecurities. This man doesn't hide her face because she did something wrong. He hides her face because he fears what the world might see, and even more, what she might realize about herself. Men who fear losing a beautiful woman don't love her more deeply. They love her more possessively. They confuse control with safety. They confuse restriction with protection. They confuse her dimmed light with loyalty. But here's what he doesn't understand. A woman who feels forced to hide her beauty doesn't stay grateful. She stays silent. And silence is where love suffocates. She begins to notice the way other couples laugh freely in public, the way other women dress without fear, the way confidence looks when it isn't being punished. She notices the weight in her chest when she puts on makeup only to wipe it off. She notices how small she feels when she should feel cherished. She notices everything, even if she doesn't say a word, and he senses it. That's why he tightens the rules, because deep down, a controlling man knows that if she ever sees her own worth clearly, she won't stay. That fear becomes his obsession. His insecurity becomes the law of the household. His jealousy becomes the mask she wears every day. But what he forgets is this: the more he hides her, the more he reveals himself. He exposes his weakness, his doubt, his fear of being compared, his fear of not being enough. A man who loves a woman wants the world to see her shine and still feel secure, knowing she comes home to him. That is confidence. That is partnership. That is love without fear in its bones. But a man who hides his wife's face is not protecting her. He is protecting himself from the possibility that she might one day outgrow him. The turning point begins with something small, something he never expects. It might be a conversation with a friend, a comment from a stranger, or a moment where she sees a reflection of herself and remembers the woman she used to be. A woman with expression, a woman with confidence, a woman who didn't need permission to exist. And in that tiny spark of memory, something powerful awakens. The realization that love should make her feel safe, not hidden. When she begins to reclaim little pieces of herself, he feels threatened. Not because she's doing anything wrong, but because her growth exposes his insecurity. She puts on makeup one morning, not for attention, but for herself, and he reacts. She laughs too freely at a joke. He reacts. She posts a picture with her friends. He reacts. Every time she steps back into the world, he feels himself losing the control he thought was love. But this is where men misunderstand something essential. A woman who hides for you does not love you more. She simply fears upsetting you. And fear is not devotion, it's captivity. When she finally decides to stand tall, to lift her chin, to show her face without shame, she's not rebelling. She's remembering that she is worthy, remembering that beauty is not a crime, remembering that a relationship should elevate both people, not shrink one for the comfort of the other. She begins to see that real love celebrates presence, not silence. Real love allows expression, not erasure. Real love protects, without imprisoning. And here's the truth men need to absorb deeply. You cannot love someone and diminish them at the same time. You cannot call it care when it's control. When he sees her step into her confidence, he panics, because now he realizes something he never prepared for. Her beauty was never the danger, his insecurity was. And as she grows stronger, he faces the truth he avoided for years. A woman forced to dim her light eventually becomes the brightest version of herself, the moment she stops living for someone else's approval. Because the heart always chooses freedom over fear, and once she remembers who she is, she'll never let anyone hide her again. A man who loves a woman wants the world to see her shine and still feel secure knowing she comes home to him. That is confidence. That is partnership. That is love without fear in its bones. But a man who hides his wife's face is not protecting her. He is protecting himself from the possibility that she might one day outgrow him. There comes a moment when a woman realizes something is terribly wrong, not because of how she looks, but because of how the man beside her reacts to the world looking at her. A moment where she notices that every time another person compliments her, his jaw tightens. Every time she smiles in public, his eyes harden. Every time her beauty is acknowledged, his insecurity turns into quiet punishment. And she starts shrinking, not because she wants to, but because she's been trained to. This is what happens when a man confuses protecting with possessing, and what he can't control, he tries to hide. You would think a man who has a beautiful wife would feel proud, honored, grateful, but not him. Her beauty doesn't inspire him. It threatens him. It exposes the cracks he refuses to fix within himself. It awakens fears he never learned how to tame. And instead of working on those insecurities, instead of rising to the level of the woman he chose, he tries to dim her into someone safer, someone smaller, someone invisible. So he tells her to cover up. He tells her not to wear makeup. He tells her not to post pictures. He tells her not to attract attention. Yet he forgets something crucial. Her beauty is not a performance. It is not a problem. It is not a threat. It is simply part of who she is. And when a man tries to hide what makes his woman shine, all he reveals is the darkness inside himself. But here's the real tragedy. She starts believing him. She starts thinking that her beauty is the cause of conflict, that her presence brings danger, that her light creates chaos. She starts apologizing for things she can't control. She starts covering, not her face, but her spirit. She becomes careful, quiet, reduced. This is what emotional shrinking looks like. It doesn't happen in one argument. It happens in hundreds of tiny comments that sound like concern but feel like restriction. And what he doesn't realize is this: a woman doesn't stay because she's hidden. She stays because she feels safe to be seen. When a man forces his wife to hide her face, he isn't protecting her. He's protecting himself from his jealousy, his fear, his insecurity. But in the process, he destroys the very thing he claims to love. Because a woman cannot love a man who is constantly afraid of losing her, but she can love a man who chooses to rise enough that he never fears her shine. And here's the truth that every man watching this needs to understand. What that husband did to his wife wasn't love, and it wasn't protection. It was fear. Fear disguised as authority, insecurity disguised as leadership, and control disguised as care. But the real tragedy isn't just what he demanded from her. It's what he made her believe about herself. Because when a woman is repeatedly told to dim her light, she starts to think her brightness is a burden. When she's told to hide, she begins to believe her presence is a problem. And when the man she loves treats her beauty like a threat instead of a blessing, she learns to shrink until she barely recognizes herself. But here's the moment he never expected. The moment she finally realized that love is not supposed to feel like disappearing, she began to understand that no man should ever ask her to trade her identity for his comfort. She saw that the more she hid to protect his ego, the more she lost pieces of her confidence, her personality, her joy. And the day she looked at herself in the mirror without covering her face, that was the day everything changed. Because the truth is, a man who loves from insecurity will always fear the world. But a man who loves from strength will empower the woman beside him to stand tall, shine brightly, and be fully seen. When she stepped out of that shadow, when she refused to keep living under his rules, she discovered something life-changing. The world didn't fall apart when she stopped hiding. He did. And the moment she felt the air on her face, the moment she walked down the street without lowering her gaze, the moment she realized people were not judging her but simply seeing her, she understood something powerful. She was never the problem. His insecurity was. His jealousy was. His need for control was. And the saddest part? He mistook possession for love, and in doing so, he lost the very person he tried to keep. She didn't leave because she wanted attention. She left because she deserved freedom. She left because she wanted a partner, not a prison guard. Now I want to ask you something real. If you love someone, do you lift them up or do you hold them down without realizing it?